In the early 2000s, going to the movies was more than just a weekend pastime. It was a cultural ritual. The thrill of queuing outside the theater, the smell of fresh popcorn, the way the lights dimmed just before the opening credits. All of it combined into an experience that made cinema magical. For many of us, these theaters weren't just buildings with screens, they were temples of imagination, places where stories came alive and communities gathered. Families, friends, and even strangers shared the collective anticipation of a big release, a ritual that made each film feel like an event rather than just another piece of entertainment. The golden age of cinema, in this sense, wasn't just about box office numbers or blockbuster hits. It was about experience, the shared excitement, the idea of a couple of hours the world outside didn't exist. And anything could happen on that enormous screen. But over time, cracks began to show in this perfect picture. The rise of streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and eventually Disney Plus marked the beginning of a slow, almost invisible transformation into the way people consumed media. What used to require a planned outing, buying tickets, driving to the theater, waiting in line, was suddenly available with the tap of a finger. Entire libraries of films, from timeless classics to brand new releases, could be streamed from the comfort of home. This convenience was slowly but surely reshaped our expectations. Suddenly, the idea of sitting in a crowded theater for a film you could pause, rewind, or skip entirely at home began to feel outdated. The ritual was being replaced by digital convenience of the couch and the remote, a shift subtle at first but relentless in its consequences. By 2021, the efforts of this shift became undeniable. Reports from the Motion Picture Association indicated a measurable decline in global theater attendance, attributing much of this drop to the rise of streaming. The convenience and affordability of subscription based services drew audiences away from theaters, changing not just where we watched films, but how we thought about them. Movies were no longer event driven. They became content to consume, as disposable as the next episode on a binge watch queue. The communal aspect of cinema, the collective gasps, laughter, and suspense, was slowly being replaced by solitary viewing experiences, often alone or with a handful of friends. The COVID 19 pandemic acted as an accelerant in this already evolving landscape. Suddenly, theaters were closed indefinitely, premieres were delayed, and blockbusters were forced into limbo. Studios, scrambling to recoup losses, began releasing films directly on streaming platforms or using hybrid models where a movie would debut in theaters and on streaming simultaneously. Films like Mulan and Wonder Woman 1984 became emblematic of this shift, highlighting a new reality. If audiences couldn't go to theaters, the studios would bring theaters to them. What had already been a slow shift towards at home viewing became a full on migration. And while some theaters reopened as restrictions eased, many audiences had adapted to a new norm where the comfort of home outweighed the spectacle of the cinema. Economic factors amplified this transformation. Ticket prices continued to rise year after year. In the US, the average movie ticket reached $13.17 in 2022, up from $11.67 in 2021. And that didn't include the additional costs of concessions, which often surpassed the ticket itself. For many viewers, particularly younger audiences and those in lower income brackets, The combined expense made a subscription to Netflix or another streaming service not just more appealing, but economically logical. With these platforms offering hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours of content at a fixed monthly price, the value proposition of theaters began to pale in comparison. The ritual of the outing remained appealing to some, but for many, the choice was simple. Why pay more for less convenience? Movie theaters tried to adapt. Chains like AMC rolled out subscription models that allowed patrons to watch multiple films per month for a set fee, attempting to mimic the flexibility of streaming services while keeping the theater experience intact. Luxury seating, gourmet concessions, and immersive technologies like IMAX, Dolby Cinema, and 4DX were introduced to entice audience seeking more than just a movie. They wanted an experience. These adaptations were partially successful, but they couldn't fully counter the larger shift in viewing habits. While theaters could sell luxury and spectacle, they couldn't replicate the simplicity, accessibility, or sheer volume of content available on streaming platforms. The cinema of the future may not be dead. It may simply be different, reimagined as a place for spectacle, luxury, and communal experiences, existing alongside the endless stream of content that flows into our homes. Ultimately, the story of theaters and streaming is not just about technology. It's about how we value stories, experiences, and the spaces where we share them.